Hi, I'm Zansi. My name is Rala and welcome to the Old Mutual Thought Leadership podcast series. And I'm so excited because if you know me, you know I'm all about women. And for this Women's Month, we're going to have a very, very special conversation because as women, we need to be breaking glass ceilings in male-dominated industries. And for somebody like myself who gets to do that in media and entertainment, I now get to engage with other women in other spaces so that we can look at sustainability and not just the once-off conversations that usually happen for us as ladies. So already Old Mutual creating a platform such as this, and make sure you stay tuned to all of their platforms because Old Mutual continues to do great things, not just what we're doing today for the ladies and gents. The conversation is also for you. So stick around. Ladies, how are you doing?
You're doing great. Doing well.
Can I just say you all look like money? The green for the money with Old Mutual. I'm going to start on this side. Please introduce yourself to Mzansi and tell us what it is that you do.
Hi, everyone. My name is Nomaswa Zingwane, and I'm the Human Capital Executive in the Mass and Foundation cluster at Old Mutual.
And back in the day, it was HR, resources. Personnel. Now human capital. It sounds fancy, but I'm going to come back and ask you about what the title change has done for women, but also how you look at staff in your business. Another fine lady from Boasa. Please introduce yourself.
Hello, my name is Mandla Sanana. I am the president of the Business Women's Association of South Africa. I am also an entrepreneur who's been in business for the past 7 years and run an organization called Rubik's Media in the media and communication space.
So you and I were here,
yes,
our industry. Ooh. And finally, but not at the bottom of the list, please introduce yourself for everybody watching.
Good evening. My name is Reabetu Musala. I am the General Manager for Alternative Distribution in the Mass and Foundation cluster at Old Mutual. A lot of people will ask, what is alternative distribution? It basically encompasses our broker channel, franchise channel, our direct business, so that's the call center and digital sales, as well as the newly established virtual advisor channel.
Firstly, that sounds very complicated. So if we were to simplify it, your job, right? So what are you distributing? Because people think delivery,
So as a financial services institution, we primarily distribute financial services solutions.
I got you.
Life insurance, long-term savings, and the likes.
All right. I want to go around the table first before we really get into the depths of some of the things that you do in your contributions. As a woman, do you feel like you are seen in your workspaces?
I can go first. So I think we're very fortunate, at least from an Old Mutual retail mass perspective, to work for an organization that has quite a high number of women in leadership. So you certainly feel seen because there's people like you around you, above, next to, and below, and it feels like home. And I think that makes it helpful. I think what helps also, if you look at the types of jobs, and if you think historically, some of the work that we are exposed to as women, or the types of jobs that women have today, it's the same as men. So I definitely would say I feel seen, I feel heard. I'm surrounded by peers. I mean, I work quite closely with Ria. And it's nice to be in an environment where diversity is actually taken seriously and you feel included.
Definitely. And I mean, diversity, inclusion, those are keywords that many people know how to use when they speak about them, but few know how to actually live and practice. I can only imagine that at Boasa, you are approached with a million of problems. Do you often have women coming through to say, guys, I can a solution. I'm on the outside, but I've got some solutions to our challenges? Because yes, we are struggling getting at certain tables where, now we're still celebrating, oh, you're the first Black woman, you're the first this. You're like, okay, but I'm alone here. Who's with me? What are some of the things that you observe?
I think from our perspective, and I just want to jump on the being seen answer to begin with. I think with the women we interact with and our members, one of the biggest challenges that they still face, and I also am one of those people, is being able to not only step into spaces that were predominantly not open to women, but your voice being heard. But beyond that, I think when we're talking economics and business, for women to really be seen as real value creators in the economy, we still have challenges where we are there for the cute stuff, the catering, the marketing. And I know our industry is quite in depth, right? But when it comes to real value creation businesses in the South African economy, I still believe that women aren't seen for the real value that they contribute, not only as people that are in those particular sectors, but as thought leaders, experts, etc. And I think gender still plays a certain role. But in terms of, being able to find solutions and work with organizations that are really, really invested in women. And I like what Swazi mentioned, is that there are many organizations that use the keywords. They greenwash, they whitewash, they womanwash. Maybe it's a new term, they gender
I'm
wash.
I'm stealing that for my radio show.
And we
Stealing
gender
that.
wash, but we actually aren't really intentional around supporting women, allowing them to have space to express, space to even showcase our diversity. And I think when we think about diversity, it's not just that diversity of our physical constructs, right? It's diversity of skills, it's diversity of thinking, it's diversity of problem solving. So it's important when we have these conversations with, as Swazi mentioned, with the likes of Old Mutual, we really start getting to the real nitty-gritty of how do we ensure that women find their place in the economy and their valuable place in the economy. There's a lot of businesses, but they're not even close to where traditionally male-owned businesses are. And I think the onus is on us to make sure that we are really seen for our true contribution to the broader conversation around South Africa. Yeah.
I love you just mentioning the diversity, because sometimes the gender washing is women are in one box, but now we have choice. So some women want to take more time for themselves, want to find a healthier work-life balance. Some women want to be at the office an hour early, an hour later, and they still want to champion you have to work 10 times harder. So because we know at Old Mutual you are seen, in your space when you entered, did you ever find, taking on such a position in that space that you are in, which has been male dominated, have you found that, okay, now I'm here, great, I'm recognized, I'm seen, but I'm still kind of not heard by everybody? And it doesn't have to be the ones you're sitting at the table with, even the people that are under you, that they undermine you. Especially if you're pretty like you, girl. Especially if you're pretty.
It's an interesting one, Lebo. Swazi made the point, in our executive team, we are mostly female.
Yes.
And you are seen, you are heard. We're given the platform to say what we think and speak our minds and contribute. So it's absolutely awesome. But then you can imagine being a young black female thrown into this world of distribution, working with mostly people that are older than you as a starting point, mostly males, mostly people that have been in the industry for a lot longer than you have. It can be daunting. But I think what I've appreciated about the team that I work with is they've allowed me to show up as myself in the workplace. I'm quite curious, naturally. I ask a lot of questions. I love learning. So I've shown up in that instance. I guide through questions. I know guys don't like being told what to do. But through my inquisitive nature, through my questioning, I have found a space to work with the team and to get the results that we need to get with the team. So I think I've certainly been lucky that I haven't experienced the pain points being a young female leader in a space like that. But I've really appreciated the opportunity to show up as my true self in that environment. What I love the most about what you said as well is we do find, because we deal with third-party intermediaries, independent brokers and the like, we are pushing the female agenda, but it's moving so slow and at such a slow pace. As it stands today, I was told only about 15% of our brokers that are on our panel are females. From our franchise side, it's more closer to like a 45-50%. So we're certainly seeing the shifts with females standing up and saying, I don't have to go and own a bakery or be a, open up a creche or whatever it is. I can succeed in financial services and I can stand up and show up as well. which is fantastic.
I loved what you said about, for me, it's such a key leadership thing that you said, which was you ask questions, because that allows a person to figure things out for themselves. Kind of like when we speak to our toddlers, we're like, is that the right thing to do?
Absolutely sure that's what you want to do.
And I think it's a nice way to also make people feel heard. So 100%. For you, I mean, Swazi, you're in the HR space. How did you get into that space? Because one of the things I realized is when you are a small business owner and entrepreneur like myself, we don't get trained in HR, but majority of my job is managing people, egos, personalities, expectations, and the like. And sometimes you do need to do the, are we going to be okay? conversation. And sometimes you got to be firm. I've had to pull ladies aside to say, after a job interview, do not ever sell yourself short again. You're asking for too little money. Stop coming here like,
apologetic.
Yes. And I think you're quite experienced in that space. So I want to hear about your journey, but also what have you learned about people that everybody can take away that maybe some people haven't figured out? Because now you're in the job of not just the human beings that are the employees of the business. You also have to answer to the stakeholders, to the executives, to the board possibly, and justify certain things that you live and see that to some people is just a spreadsheet.
That question is a book. I'll try.
I went in hard.
I'll try and summarize, I suppose, my journey and my passion it started as a passion for people. So I started studying psychology in first year, realized that I have a different connection to people. So I think
you're like
I'm too much
the
of an
feelings
empath.
are too much.
I'm a big empath, and I carried a lot of things and took it home. And I realized quite quickly, fortunately, while I was studying, that my fascination with business combined with my fascination for people's behavior, the mind growth, could come together quite nicely in what was personnel back then.
Yes.
And now human capital. So I think that's how I kind of landed and found myself in the HR space. I think starting out as a young HR practitioner, the first thing you deal with is you're a very young female. I finished school really early at 20. Nobody's going to tell a 20-year-old their office problems or the challenges they have with their manager. Fortunately, I was at one of the organizations took a chance on me from a graduate perspective. And I think, fortunate or unfortunate, I landed in a very male-dominated environment. I was in breweries. You were surrounded by males in the warehouse, in the manufacturing plants, and you quickly have to find a way and survive. And I think learning quite early on that my assertiveness, my too strongness is actually resilience and I'm assertive, I'm not disrespectful. And having to build boundaries and people understanding your role and kind of what you do. And I mean, it goes beyond HC, it's just being a female. As a female, there's certain boundaries I have. And in the workplace, you have to respect those. And I think having those conversations very early on, you'd be surprised how many babas were like,
I was gonna ask you, are they making you call them like Baba Mang Mang? And I mean, we've seen it even in Parliament.
There were a few of those who wouldn't work with me for the first year until I said that this Mang Mang. But I was quite clear on what I was there to do, and I think I'm quite a determined, resilient. I will persevere, and eventually I made it into the in crowd. And I think you have to have the patience and understanding that your battle is not just being female, but you have age, you have different, and being in a male-dominated environment, the first thing they see is a young girl who has no business in a plant.
And a woman of color. I think let's not ignore the fact that being a person of color has its own dynamics that come
100%.
with it as well. And you almost have to shove it down because you're dealing with the woman aspect. But there are those other layers because, we're not calling people Tani Mang Mang and Uncle Mang Mang, but now Ndade must be in the mix.
But also think about the women of color that are there that have tenure, are not in the jobs that you're in. They're the tea ladies, they're the cleaners. And I think it was, for me, that was kind of a big learning moment, is to partner with everyone in the organization. Everyone in the organization had something you could learn from. And I think I take a learning approach to everything. I believe every single person that works in any environment will teach you something. Sometimes it will be a hard lesson. I'll share my union stories later. But I think you learn and you grow from those experiences. And I think the biggest thing is just listening. You asked for advice for people that are coming into the work environment. I think listen. We always have the older guys, the younger guys, the 2000s and the Gen Zs and the Gen X's at the moment. And this time that we live in at the moment is the one time where we have all generations in the workplace who all did things so many different ways. And it's really about listening, being able to adapt and being open and having curiosity. So Ria, I like what you said about asking questions. Is if you don't understand things, ask questions. And I used to always give advice to people. If you see something that you don't understand, I had a manager at some point who used to ask me why my hair changes every month. And I had to recognize that for him, he didn't understand why a black girl's hair would change so often when Cindy's hair looks the same all the time.
I'm so concerned for this manager. Like, maybe we need to add to your list of KPIs that you wouldn't notice my hair.
But I prefer that you ask, right? Because then you know, and I explain it to you, and you don't treat me different or have assumptions about. And it was something so simple, and I realized actually the honest way for me to respond is to explain to him. And if you create the openness and a space for people to engage with you, regardless of age, race, honestly, people will share where they're coming from. And I think it's how you then engage with a new set of information that you have about people. So for me, the big part has really been listening, adapting to your environment. And I'm not saying change who you are, but there's some things that you may have been, then that one is quite a big one, right? So we raised, as an African child, everybody's in that Sisi, older. But then you get into the workplace and maybe that doesn't always work for everybody else because people want to be called John, Swazi, and that's what it is. And I think it's really about finding your balance and your authenticity as well. Because if I started calling people Ndade tomorrow, people will be like, so something's wrong with her. Because that's not who I am and that's not my brand. It doesn't mean I'm disrespectful. It's just that that's how I show up authentically. And if I were to force it, it would be quite visible. And that changes the tone completely about who I am and what I stand for.
I think also to add, it's important that context is painted in the picture because if you have, the cleaning staff that are cleaning up after you, it is respectful. You're like, So the context is different as opposed to, now I'm trying to raise my point in a meeting. We're all literally on the same level, but you're like,
Meh.
So I can't hear over you didn't call me Rakhaji or whatever.
Exactly.
So I think it's important. Context matters before people 100%. Are like, she's such a disrespectful this and this. She touched on something so beautiful about, learning to, if I'm to summarize, you learn to not take offense and create space for engagement. Now, if you are coming from a women's organization, and I know because I've actively said I identify as a feminist and I believe in equity, not just equality. And then it's like, you're already labeled. So how do you deal with those that are coming and feeling like what you're doing is actually divisive? Why must they be a businesswoman? What? Why must they be a? And I think it's important to share why those platforms matter. But how do you then also engage with people who say, but how are we going to move forward if we're still splitting things into genders? I already know somebody's going to comment, if the men sat for a podcast talking about their problems in the workplace. But it is important because we're still behind. That's why this conversation is happening. And we want you to be a part of it as the gents.
I think for us as an association and me personally, we can't have a conversation around countries, economies, societies growing, advancing without women at the table. My personal quote is from Thomas Sankara, and he says, conceiving a developmental project without the participation of women is like using 4 fingers when you have 10. We are in a situation as not only a country, but globally, women have not had a solid space to contribute equitably to any economies that they serve. I mean, South Africa currently, a formal business that are registered, that are owned by women, we're sitting at 21.9%. But the reality, we know that we have our rakhadis, our aunties, they've been doing some sort of transactional businesses to feed their families. They're not formalized, but they are in that economy. So if we're talking about formal businesses, that are recognized by the likes of Old Mutual and other organizations that have ESG funds and investment funds, and we're only talking about 21.9% of that being owned by women, we cannot stop having conversations around how to support women in business. To top that off, in terms of where we are as a country, a lot of women leave formal employment. They don't participate in business because there's all these other social ills that prevent them from participating. So we personally, I'm not apologetic around talking about women's issues, but I think beyond the talking is the real intentional actions as to how we address the situations that we find ourselves in. We can't say that the women's conversation needs to be off the table. A lot of young men, young women are growing up in single-led households. The woman is a critical component of not only society, but business, the economy, etc. So we will have this conversation until we see an equitable playing field. We will have this conversation until there's 50% of female representation on boards. We will have this conversation until young women are not skipping school because they just can't, because it's that time of the month. So it's not about how comfortable or uncomfortable men or the non-feminists feel about these conversations, but we need to address a lot of the imbalances in society, because there is no point having a country of a plethora of single women who are raising children, but you actually don't even have enough money to sustain that home, right? You're not getting paid equally to your male counterpart who did the exact same thing that you did in school, because you're supposed to get married and have a husband to provide for you. We are past that stage, and I think we really need to have serious conversations and be intentional around the work that we do. And very importantly, we need to start measuring the success. There's no point of spending however percentage of your funds on ESG if you can't even measure what that impact was. You can't even measure, in terms of Mandisa's business, how many other young women has she hired? So we need to constantly have these uncomfortable conversations and really address the reasons why we can't get into certain spaces, and have honest conversations with men. And I like the example that you made about sometimes it's not that people are closing out. They just don't know. They just don't know that it's important to support women.
Or they don't know how.
I hope those people don't exist.
I think it's also they don't know how, because in the same way that people will say, I want to volunteer, I want to donate, I want to whatever, I just don't know where to start. So I think we are even moving closer to the idea of, how do we make it easy for people to support women? And it comes back to be okay with somebody asking, girl, why are you changing your hair every month? And instead of you having jumped on the defense, you're like, let me actually answer. Because I got asked by a white man, why do black women always pet their hair? Right? And I was laughing because I was like, it's itchy. And it's like, what a learning. It was a light bulb moment to be like, because they've plaited and it's tight and there's heat and sweat. Oh, I always see. And then some of them have pins. I said, yes. The ones that have pins are the ones that are not even trying to pat. They're going shortcut, And I think it is important is, how do we make it easy? Which again, it's not our jobs to make it easy, but we're trying to get to point B as quickly as possible. Before I asked you about your journey, Rhea, I want to come back to a very important question for you being in HC is, I was on LinkedIn and I saw the most beautiful post by a man who said, they received a CV. And in the CV, she showed how in 18 years, she speaks about the children she raised and the things that she's taught. Because a big part, of course, of your line of work is dealing with people's CVs and hiring. And she explained the skills of, I run a household. When this happened, I stretched and I thought, how beautiful is that? I want to add that to my CV. What can you share with everyone watching that maybe there are missed opportunities in how they sell themselves. You know, you mentioned the fact that somebody may have been selling the tamati on the side of the road, but they don't feel like that is worthy of being on a CV. The fact that you could take a grant and raise children, like for me, that is worthy of being in a CV.
And I think I actually had a moment thinking of a previous manager who always used to say to me, how high is your statue? And I always used to think the statue was these big, amazing things that I've done. And one day he said to me, it's all the little things that you achieved in your career that helped you grow. And when I think about a CV, I think about it in that way. So in each role, what are the little things that I did that helped me grow that would be of value to another organization, and sharing those, and how you go about sharing that is completely up to you. I mean, I've seen all kinds of CVs look different from when I did my CV many years ago in MS-DOS, I think it was.
Oh my gosh! Revealing your age. To the young people watching, go and ask a millennial what MS-DOS is.
And
you guys, yes, you guys have Canva. We had Paint. Yes, we had Paint.
So my Paint CV will look very different to what you have today. And I think people sharing, what I'm seeing is people sharing more about the little parts of their journey and what they did to contribute to that statue. And I think people, and what I see as a cover page in the past is no longer who the person is, but what their purpose is and why organizations should buy into you. And I think those are missed opportunities. So building your statue, like the CV of the housewife, there's a lot of complex things she does in a day that you may take for granted. But I think in how she positioned it, because I think I may have seen a similar post.
Yes.
In positioning how she's done it and why it's complex, I think as an organization, that's a skill you look for. And also gone are the days of the million qualifications and certificates. People are looking for skills. Organizations are taking a skills-based approach. So what skills do you bring to the organization? We change quite rapidly. I know in IT, you could have a skill today and 2 years later become so irrelevant. And so I think making sure that you're always upskilling yourself from a skills perspective is always helpful.
And I think it's important, you know, it's not just about babies. You might have to have taken 6 months off to take care of your ailing wife. These are important things that now we can put a value on them, because for years there are many women statistically who have been doing the work that is that unpaid labor. So there is no value seen to it. But I look at my grandmother who could not read or write, who ran a business, who knew how to stretch money. There were 4 eggs and 10 grandkids, but somehow we all ate. That is a skill, you know. And I look at my own journey and how I used to think that I can't become an Oprah Winfrey if by having children. So I mustn't, I will donate. And I did not realize that motherhood actually gave me capacity. And why? Things that were not important automatically fell off the table. And now I get to decisions faster. The stakes are a lot higher. So I think it's important that we remember that as people, but in particular as women, is where's their value in things that don't have a certificate. So Ria, I'm going to change up how I'm asking you. In your journey of working your way up the ladder, what are some of the skills that you took with you that do not have a typical corporate value? And it really could be something as simple as, you know, my grandmother never turned anyone away for a plate of food. And because I think it's important we start to look at those things. We're sitting comparing CVs. Okay, let's use this template. But I didn't finish this LLB. I didn't.
So I was waiting for you to ask about the CV conversation.
Yeah.
But,
I get it. We're all updating our CVs after this now. Collectively updating. We're adding tolerated a toddler screaming at me for.
Absolutely. So I think in my journey level, education, and yes, it's formal education, but the concept and the ability and the skill to learn has been a constant factor. So my parents were both teachers. I didn't have a choice about going to school.
Yes.
I just knew that we go to school, we finish school, you go to varsity, finish varsity, you get a job, you work. And so the cycle continues. But I think what that ingrained in me was the desire to learn and the curiosity to learn new things all the time. I was fortunate enough, I'm diverging. I was fortunate enough to get a bursary from Old Mutual in my matric year.
So you're Old Mutual baby. So it was full circle.
Literally,
I love that.
I've not worked anywhere else.
Oh,
but we can talk about that another day.
Yeah.
So they found me in my matric year and gave me an opportunity to go to school to go and learn. And we get naughty at varsity, you go through things. But when I was done with my formal studies, they then said, Ria, come and work for us. We want to train you up. This is the organization we work for. It's a caring organization. And I think in my journey at Old Mutual, I've come across many different types of managers, if I can call it that. But what has been consistent is how I've been given the opportunity to learn with every single person that I have worked for. And it's something that I'm also trying to instill in my son. I was chatting to someone outside and I was saying, I'm really struggling with my boy because I think he thinks he's very smart. And so he doesn't make time sometimes to learn and to study and to understand because he thinks he knows it. But I also understand he's 9 years old. He's a boy.
Also, you were that child. You were that child as well. I can they say you get the child you deserve.
Oh my goodness. But I think just having the skill, to Swazi's point, to sit and ask questions, get to know people, understand perspectives. Once you hear perspectives, what you do with that information is completely up to you. I always say to people I work with, I will listen to you, but I will ultimately decide what I do with what I've heard. Right?
Yes.
So sometimes I'll take it, I'll build onto it, we'll create something magical. Other times I'll think that's a brilliant idea, but not for now.
Yes, yes.
And then just having the ability to then think through those situations and then make the calls as and when you need to.
But I love what you shared about the desire to learn, because sometimes you get that pinnacle position and you're like, whew, but in actual fact, your appetite should increase the higher up you go. And maybe because we think the paycheck gets bigger and we have bosses, you're like, oh man, I'm working so hard down here. And so from your side, what would you say, being a CEO, being a president, what have you learned with what those titles come with that maybe people don't think about? Because it does feel like, oh, that's the ultimate. I mean, somebody the other day said to me, you are producing shows. And for us in the industry, that's the ultimate, right? And I'm like, people don't know. I still will get on my knees and like wipe my presenter's shoes. Because if the person who should be doing it is further away and I'm looking at the clock, that's my job as a leader. That's my job as the boss. The buck stops with me. So it feels like the ultimate, but it doesn't always feel like the ultimate.
The reality is, and I think all of us around the table can attest to it. It's nice on LinkedIn and on LinkedIn. But authentic leadership is honestly being able to get your hands dirty, right? Being the first responder, being the last one to leave. And I really believe that from my perspective and the way I've prior to starting the business, just grown through my career, and starting the business, it's not about the title. It's not about the role that you're playing. It's about this vision and this passion that you have. And when you have vision and passion, you're constantly learning from everybody. You're constantly drawing in inspiration from other people. I mean, I think it was 2 years ago, I did a coaching exercise. Yeah, I did a coaching exercise. They were looking, I think it's Clifton Strengths. You're familiar with them? So they look at your traditionally strengths and weaknesses.
Yes.
And then you feel really, I almost said a big word. You feel really
the word was terrible.
You feel really terrible about the things, your character traits that are described as weaknesses. But what I liked about this program is everything is considered as a strength, but there are some strengths which are natural affinity, and some that this is the stuff you need to hand over to somebody else. This is the stuff that someone in your organization who is strong here, you need to hire them instead. And as a business owner, especially when you're starting out in the business, starting out in the beginning, everything is on your shoulders, right? Everything is on your shoulders, the marketing, the planning, the business planning, the finances, everything. And you can get in a danger of thinking you know everything and you're the expert. And that's where most businesses, I personally feel, start failing, because you don't give yourself enough grace to invite other people that can take you forward, right? You don't have the wisdom to say, okay, I suck at finance. I don't have a lot of money in the business, but for us to go ahead, I need to set some aside money and pay an accountant or someone that can handle this. So if you approach leadership with ego and me, and you get drunk on the titles, there's no growth for you. There's no growth for the people that you're employing, specifically in the role that I play in the association. There's no growth for the women. And I always say, and I was even saying this to Swazi earlier, one of the things we look for in our organization when people put their hands up to say, no, I want to volunteer, I want to be part of a committee, is, do you really honestly have the heart for women? Mm-hmm. Because we have a broad platform. You can meet a lot of influential people tomorrow, but you can't do it for self, because the work is hard. The work is painful. You get people calling you in the middle of the night. Business is tough. They need assistance wherever. So it can't be a journey that you take for self. You need to know that you are in a ministry for women. You are here to serve. You are here to help. You are here to build. And it's not the payment at the end of the day. It's the impact that you do. So when we're talking about leadership, for me, it's a title. I'm honored. I don't take it for granted. I'm really, really honored. But I think for me, what I'd like to leave behind as a legacy is that the work that I did spoke more than whatever people chose to call me. Mm-hmm. And I hope that even us, as we grow in leadership as women, when you are the first in the room, remember that you were the first so that you could open the door for others. Mm-hmm. You are not the first to close it and sit on your own. So it's always remembering that if you are put in a space of leadership, you're not there to just, who are you leading if there's no one behind you, quite frankly?
Don't kick the ladder.
Do you know what I mean? Then you're not a leader if there aren't people behind you that are inspired by you, are being supported by you, you are sponsoring them, you're speaking on their behalf in rooms that they can't be in. And for me, that's the crux of it all. The titles can be stripped away tomorrow, but what did you do when you were there?
And I think what you said is just so powerful about what you're going to do for others, because it's only really on my last experience, or most recent rather, of producing Miss South Africa, where, you know, the organization said, okay, one of our contestants is deaf. And I had to start thinking, doing homework, doing research. As you're speaking about what are you doing, right? So it was the first time that I had to work really hard to say, tell me about your world. What do you need? I'm learning about a cochlear implant. I'm learning about, hearing issues means balance issues. I'm learning about all of these things. And you learn as you go along, where you're like, okay, we're playing music. I thought your implant means you can hear music. No, I can't hear music. It sounds like a whole lot of noise. This is how you can support me. Now, I came out of that whole experience being the boss. I had to put aside money that we hadn't planned to for sign language interpreter, for subtitles. And the reason I'm explaining this story in particular is I just realized maybe when we have conversations as women and men sit around a table, it feels like an unnecessary expense, right? Because women, we come in, okay, do you have kids? Oh, she might want other children. Maternity leave. And I thought to myself, as you're speaking, wow, I wonder if it's the same, because I had to go after the whole thing and say, we did our best, but we still have more work to do. Because when I speak now to the deaf community, we don't yet have automated captions for a live show. Yes. We have a sign language interpreter, but you have to think about the fact that the box is small. Not everybody can read lips. So I know we didn't get it right. But that now drove me more to say, okay, I need to learn even more. I need to engage with more people. Do you think that is how men sometimes, or men at tables, feel about bringing women? because you're like, we're complicating. Giddy menstrual cycle, giddy. You know what I mean? Like, it only just dawned on me. I'm like, maybe that's how men look at us. I just was driven by the fact that this is a great opportunity to be inclusive. And even if we're not going to get it perfect and we're going to be criticized, let's just start with what we have. And what we have is, okay, I'll put aside the money. I'll save here to make this happen. And after the show, I had to say at the press conference, we did not get it right. It's our first time. We're still learning, but I'm glad we started. And sometimes you want things to be perfect before you start.
I will say, similar to that, I don't think we've gotten it right. It's unfair to say, because of a few great experiences I've had, I believe that it's the same everywhere else. I do think it probably still happens where men do feel that she's a young female. I know sometimes there's maybe a fear that because you don't have children, she's going to have children and probably not the best person to appoint.
Or now that you've had a child, what if she doesn't want to come back to work? Okay, now the child is growing. Now she's going to want a sibling for that.
What if she wants to spend more time with the child? So many things come up, and I think it's all in education. But what I am proud to say I see a lot more of is women being appointed 6, 8, 9 months pregnant, right? People sign the offer and come in an organization and go and take maternity leave. I think that's a huge leap. It might not feel like it. If I think when I started my career, it was quite frowned upon to hire someone that was pregnant. You wouldn't say it, but someone would look and say, but they're going to come in and go on maternity leave. But now people are like, oh, congratulations. That's fine. And sign the offer and we continue because actually we're there for your brain. And this is in the moment, something that's temporary, right? You're not pregnant forever. So I think we've made ships, definitely. But I do think in the back of men's minds, and I mean, now I'm speaking for men, I do apologize if I get it wrong. I do think that they will think about the different things that we may go through as females and wonder if they have appetite to have people on maternity leave. What does it mean? And if you're in a sales-driven environment, it gets even harder because you paid on your bonuses, you paid for performance. And if I'm not there, I'm not selling, right? So it gets very, very difficult. And I think it's really shifting mindsets and showing the value and what it does. I think it goes beyond just the numbers. I think the other part of it, and when we were speaking about some of the softer things, and I say softer as a housewife, things that you would do in your role as a housewife, and I'm not saying they're soft. If you think about the values that many organizations are out there saying we stand for, actually that's mirroring what your organization is meant to be and actually acting it out. So it's very well and good to say we respect, we are all about accountability, we embrace diversity, we include everyone. It also means including people that are pregnant at a point in time.
That's true.
And if they want to have 2, 3, 4 back to back, then that's a conversation that you have and you plan for. And I think the work that's happening at the moment will get us there. But I can't comfortably say I don't think men don't think that way.
So, I mean, let's also be honest and real. We know that women also think that way. I mean, I won't lie. I remember when I was preparing for another season of my talk show and we need to expand the team. And at the time it was, we weren't in hard lockdown, but things were sort of easing out and we were able to go into workspaces and take our masks off. And the lady straight up said to me on the phone, listen, I just want to tell you up front, I am like 7 months pregnant. And I said, okay, cool. Let me chat to the team and I'll come back to you. And my initial thought was, oh, hell no. My child came a month early and how are we going to work, And then I had to be like, okay, just take a moment because the referral was there for a reason.
Yeah.
So I said to her, you know what? What would make your situation easier? She's like, okay, if I can work from home, if I can this. I said, cool stuff. I said, keep me posted on how your things are. You don't have to hide anything from me because at the time I had a newborn. The only way we're going to make it work for everybody is if we're open, which is tricky because companies aren't allowed to ask you certain things. But I said, I'm here for support if you need. And we worked. And literally the first time we met in person was when we were wrapping 2 seasons later. We had never met in person. Isn't that crazy? We were meeting online and she came to surprise me and she said, thank you for hiring me. No one was going to hire me. Now, here's the hard part of the conversation. As women, we also think that way.
100%.
Right? So, I don't know. I'm going to ask you, Mandisa, how have you seen us as women being an enemy to ourselves. They say women are the biggest gatekeepers of patriarchy. How have we been self-sabotaging? Because not all women think the same. Not all women think that you, Rhea, should be in your position or that you should be an executive. So sometimes even us sitting here as a group saying, we women, we don't speak for all women.
That's
so
true.
how
That's
can
true.
we address where maybe we are not doing right by ourselves? Do you need a drink before you answer
that?
that?
If I'm going to keep, I'll keep my other job because I run the business myself.
And it's a hard question because I even have to admit that I did it myself. Where to be like, girl, what do you mean you're 7 months pregnant? Why are you here? But it's like, hey, I need to provide. It's like, let's make it work. And it worked out beautifully.
I think, and I'm trying not to be too politically correct because if we don't have hard conversations, things don't change. And I'll draw on my own personal experiences. I think that will be the safest way of addressing this and also talks to the spaces that I operate in. I've had challenges. From when I started working, my first job was at SABC many moons ago. And I've always had challenges with female managers, female leaders, and the like, right? And I think there's a part that is because of that person's character traits. But also there's a part where people learned bad behavior in corporate from other men. And for me, it was just being able to understand those dynamics. You met a male boss that was hard on you and horrible and didn't assist you in getting further. So now you're in a position of management and leadership and you think this is what leadership should look like.
Also, why did I have to suffer and you're not going to suffer?
And and I think that happens across the gender divide. But in my own personal experience, I've had the most supportive male leaders in my life that assisted me in getting my career where it was before I started the business, and really, really being open and honest around me as a leader, me as an employee, where my pitfalls are. And the conversation would be authentic, not emotional. And that allowed me to really, in the workspace, be able to grow and not take things too personally. In instances where I had women in management, it would be next thing we're ghosting each other for 2 weeks. But this is business, right? It's business. It's not personal. And sometimes I really do believe our emotions as women get in the way. When I look at some of the ladies we deal with in the association or people that come to networking sessions, and I think it's one thing that all associations still do networking, which for me is a bit of a tricky one because we open up the floor, you meet Swazi, you meet Ria, you meet Lebu, and then before you even start talking about the thing that brings you together, the collaboration on the project or the business or whatever project or support you're looking for from another woman in business, we end up feeling like we must first have 5 tea parties. And I do understand the women are different, right? We are more
Somebody
emotional.
heard you at a brunch and a tea party and a high tea.
I think we are more emotional and we relate to each other at an emotional level. But I really do believe that at times, if we aren't aware, that can sometimes be a hindrance in how far we go ahead. When you look at it on the flip side, in terms of other women that have walked the path before you, it's almost this fear that now there's this junior me that's going to kick me out of my seat, as
Overtake
opposed to
me.
you being this big sister, this guide, this person that will give the young woman a leg up, hold her hand, give her tips in terms of how to navigate this very different world. And I think that's where I think us as women, we need to be honest, not only in terms of how we show up in work or show up in business, but really be honest in terms of what kind of character trait do you actually want to have when dealing with other women in business, right? We all have our biases. We all have our stereotypes. One of the things, and I'm glad you mentioned Tabayabuntat. Now, I tell the young women all the time, and it comes as a shock. I'm like, don't call me Sis Mandisa anything. Because we are sitting at the same table. You bring a skill set, I'm bringing a skill set. The moment you start calling me Sisi, You'll be afraid of calling me out. You'll be afraid of correcting me where I'm wrong. You'll be afraid of, affirming and asserting yourself, because now you have positioned yourself at a lower level than me. And meanwhile, I've got so much to learn from you, because our digital marketing was only Facebook. That's all we knew. So I've got a lot to learn from younger people. They've come with different thinking. So cut off those titles. I know you respect me. I respect you too. I then had problems with the older ones that I wasn't calling Sissy. And then, things became a little bit strange. But I think, honestly, even as Black women, I think this is where I want to go and close it off here. Even as Black women in industry, Black women in business, Black women in corporate, guys, we are bottom of the barrel most of the time. The last thing we need is for another Black woman to push another one down. We need to talk about how we address each other respectfully. I didn't grow up in a household where my older sisters and brothers were Sisi and Abuti. We called each other by name. So having to ask me at age 40 to call you OC is not natural. I step out of who I am. Now I have to think, if I'm speaking to Lebo, I must remember, and then so I think let's give each other space for people to really show up truly as themselves, and remember where you were all alone and it was tough, and try and really honestly make life easier for another woman. It takes nothing off you. It really doesn't change your bank account, but you will be blessed for it, right? For being that person that was there to be the guide, the leader, and opening up that space. We are different. We are diverse. We speak different languages. We may not understand why the young people are coming to work with orange hair, but you didn't hire their hair. You hired their skill sets. You hired their soft skills. You hired them for a purpose and a reason. And the job is for us to help each other and take each other forward. We were just talking earlier about, and I don't want to shine on your shine. You can shine. We're just talking earlier about how, as Africans, most of us are awakening to our traditional spiritualities. If corporates and business doesn't hold space for people that need to be away from work to take on that journey, are we really calling ourselves diverse and inclusive and etc.? So inclusivity is expensive. Inclusivity is difficult, but that's the only way, if we are intentional and understand all these different dynamics that we are facing. How then do we build successful economies, successful companies that ensure that everybody finds a space to express and grow? Yeah.
What I'm taking from what you've said as well, just to come back to the whole thing of holding the elevator or working for the person who feels like I suffered, you must suffer too. And I think accepting that your journey was, because if you are breaking ceilings in male-dominated industries, the ceiling is broken now. So if it's broken, why should there still be the pressure of fighting up? You broke it. So the acceptance must come for all of us. And this is across age, anybody who's breaking ceilings anyway, that you did the suffering so that the next behind you don't have to.
Yeah.
And maybe it is hard for us to accept because it's maybe not your child or maybe not, whatever the case may be. But for me, I think the sooner we can shorten the distance between what maybe took me 10 years to do can now take you 5 years to do without there being bitterness about it. Because that's part of my legacy is I want to know that when I'm gone, people are like, yo, if it weren't for Lebogile doing this. I mean, I bumped into a young lady recently when I went for an interview at a news channel. And she came to me and she's like, I hope you remember me. I said, of course I do. Now, she came to my radio show when she was in grade 10 for a Take a Girl Child to Work day. And we spent the day together. So I said to her, this is the day I want you to come because you're going to sit with me in my meetings as well. Like where we're discussing budgets, we're discussing projects, we're doing radio. And she was in her school uniform. And I said, take it in, ask questions. And she asked questions and her mom would keep in touch with me. Oh, she matriculate. Oh, she this. So when I bumped into her recently, she said, now I'm working at this news channel, but you don't understand how spending that one day with you influenced the trajectory of my life. So I want to jump then to the platforms, I mean, you've mentioned networking, the mentorships. How do we actually now do that thing actively of not just breaking the ceiling and sending the elevator down? How are we actively going out? Because it is hard. We are busy. I try my best to create opportunities. And I'll sometimes say to interns, I'm the worst person for you to shadow because I'll never get a chance to explain a thing. So certain interns, if you want to be there and take notes and just watch and see what's happening at this level. But other people want to stop and understand what's your job. So how do we find that balance, especially yourself in an executive role? And I'll start with yourself, Rhea, where you say, I actually want to mentor someone. How do you create the time, but also make it that they actually are learning? Because it's work having somebody with you while you're in the middle of a hard day, which is kind of what they need to see.
Absolutely, and give that person enough attention for them to feel like they're getting value out of the experience, right? What you said is so profound about the ceiling. I'm stealing it.
Don't worry, I stole the woman washing, gender washing. Okay.
So I think we do need to create the time and the space level. As an example, we've got our training program for accountants at Old Mutual. They're constantly looking for mentors and supervisors to walk the journey with these young kids that are coming straight from varsity into the work environment. Yes, they've got line managers. Yes, they've got requirements, competencies, technical skills to build. But sometimes they just need someone who's been in the business that they can talk to, bounce their thinking off and the likes. So I think programs like that within the organization give us the opportunity to mentor firstly, but secondly, as a supervisor, we're then required to bring people into our businesses and provide the technical expertise and say, this is how you put together a business strategy, and allow them to walk that journey with you. Understanding stakeholder management. These are the people you engage in order to achieve what, so that what can happen. Creating that time and space is critical. I agree with you, it's not always that simple. The other thing I've always been quite keen on, and probably that's why the team thought it would be good for us to meet as well, is around small business development and enterprise development. I've always had in the back of my mind that I've got skills that I know I can use to make a difference. And that for me has just been a low-hanging fruit. Recently joined the Psycha Enterprise Development Program as a coach, as an example. So I'm working with a young lady there.
So Psycha, just for everybody who doesn't know. Yes.
This is the old mutual way. South African Institute of Chartered Accountants.
Yes.
So they run an ED program. That is
what is ED?
We
always need to.
I'm so sorry.
All the acronyms, we're going to learn them. There was another one you said, EID or ESD. What's ESD?
Enterprise Supplier Development.
Okay, we're learning together. Okay, yes.
So those opportunities present themselves and you walk that journey. This lady I'm working with runs a small bakery in the back room in, her mom's yard. And I chatted to her the first time, and she's got wonderful aspirations, dreams. She wants to have a proper established business, bake, sell, grow, weddings, funerals, everything. And I look at it from a different angle. I'm like, okay, we're going to help you set your structures in place, because her business at the moment does not have any structures, processes. So in that way, I'm giving back some of my time. And I think as people with various skill sets, various professions and the likes, that makes a small difference, but it makes a massive impact when most of us start to give back in that way. So it's really just about creating the time and capacity, I think, Lebo, and just being intentional about it and walking that journey.
I think I used to feel bad that I couldn't respond to all the people in my DMs. I had people in their 30s who were like, I want to pivot in my career. Can I just spend the day with you? So what I ended up telling myself is, actually, why don't I make it easy for myself to help somebody help themselves? And it literally meant looking within my family to say, you're not working, you're not doing anything. Yes. I know you didn't get into varsity this year. just come hang out with me. And now that person is working in my industry because after a few days, they said to me, I realized that I need to talk to people. Like you introduced me to people, but I sat there quietly listening to you engage. Now when they started talking to people, oh, what do you do? What do you like? They found out her interest. Now they started giving her opportunities. And that was my way because it's someone who wasn't doing anything. I said, you're not doing anything. Just roll with me.
Just exposure.
Yes, exposure, because maybe I can't give the exposure the way I would like to. And I will continue to look for those ways to mentor and all of those things. At Bwasa, in terms of young businesswomen that are coming in, that are, you mentioned you can network with influential people. You've got the networking, but what are the things outside of networking and mentorship that maybe we've touched on that are there?
I think for us, outside of the networking and the mentorship opportunities and spaces we provide for our members, the core function is advocacy from a businesswomen's association point of view. What this essentially means is that we are able to advocate for women in leadership, through our census, advocate for women in business. One of the forums that we are involved in is called the Women Economic Assembly, that is set up as a private-public partnership. And the project sits within the presidency and the Department of Women. And what we are essentially doing through the assembly is to intentionally seek out procurement opportunities, supply value opportunities for women. That is based on the 40% minimum 40%. There's 50% of women, but we okay with the minimum 40% procurement needs to be set aside for women. So those are the roles that we're currently playing in the market. Also very critical to us is the training and development of SMMEs in the various sectors that they operate in. Our organization is sector agnostic. It's women from mining, women in catering. But now, leading up to our 45th year, we're turning 45 next year.
Yes. You were born into Bwasa.
But leading up to that, I think we've taken a stance to be more intentional around the development of SMMEs and women in business in South Africa. And I'll say it openly, and maybe these organizations won't ever want to see my face. But I think there's a lot of developmental money in South Africa, whether it's from the DFIs, the banks, and very importantly from corporate South Africa through ESD funding. But what I personally feel, and it's personal opinion, what I personally feel and what I've seen in terms of how women are being supported through these programs, it actually hasn't moved the needle when you really think about it, right? A lot of the programs, again, are coaching and mentoring and soft skills. Women need money in their businesses. We meet women who bootstrapped, started their own factories. They've got a mini factory going on. They actually need growth and developmental funds to actually take their businesses forward, right? But in terms of the way most organizations approach enterprise and supplier development, we just want to tick the box and it's fine. We coached 100 women, gave them digital marketing skills. Have a Wi-Fi. They don't have internet.
They don't have a smartphone, a device.
You absolutely know digital marketing now. Fantastic. But the means of being able to use that skill and take your business forward, no one has actually thought that through. So for me, it's ensuring that as an organization, we are right at the center of understanding if we are dealing with a cohort of 10 women who are manufacturing skin care products, right? What do they actually need so that at the end of these 2 years or 6 months, their business is further than what they were when they started, right? Because it's no benefit giving them a certificate at the end of it and a graduation, but they still go back to the same situation. Because what then you find is that entrepreneurs end up being, there's a word I'm a marketer. Please copyright all these words I'm coming up with. You know how there's a system of tenderpreneurs? Now there are there are program entrepreneurs. An entrepreneur will jump from this program to the next one, to the next one.
But they're in the same place.
Yes.
They don't
and for
move.
5 years, you've been in programs and you're doing pitching competitions. And
Isn't
winning
it called
10,000
toxic
rand.
entrepreneurship? That's what I'm going to call it. Toxic entrepreneurship.
But it's silly in a sense that it also means that as industry and as industry bodies, there is very little regulation when it comes to the developmental space. Because if there was regulation, you'd be able to pick up on a system that, no, Lebo's been on the same program with 3 different corporates already. It's time, we can't accept her anymore. But because the funds need to be spent and it gets reported in the financial results that the funds were spent, they supported entrepreneurs. But for me, it's really what's the word I'm looking for? It's really challenging us as organizations that represent women, as women in business, as women in corporate, as corporate leaders, as government, to be really, really intentional in terms of how we spend this money, drive the usage of this money, so that we can actually reach all these targets that we seem to be missing year in, year out. But beyond that, really get to a point where we are tackling unemployment in South Africa because we are properly supporting small businesses and women, effectively so, right? So I'll stop there because
Look, I think what's powerful is that we're saying, there are box ticking exercises that look like, oh, we are doing the things that you've asked for. There's the money being spent. Now we need to go the step further, which is to say, please show us the impact for every rand. Yes. How has that rand now grown? How has it reached other women and so on and so forth? So as we start to, wrap up our conversation, I'm going to, ask you all a very difficult question, and it's only difficult because I'm forcing you to make it one sentence. And you're all great talkers. Okay, I'm going to start on your side.
Start, yeah.
My leadership style is
authentic and servant leadership.
Ooh, I like that one. Yours is, after the ceiling has been broken.
Let's go to the movie. After the ceiling has been broken, bring others along, plow back, and ensure that what you went through doesn't have to be a repeat cycle, especially the negatives. Yeah, I'll leave it there.
Full stop. As the young people say, period. And yours, in closing, Old Mutual for Women is. You're the Old Mutual baby at the table. So.
Old Mutual for Women is a space to show up authentically and proudly so as a female. Lots of commas in my sentence.
There's also the semicolon.
Not trying to be men, but show up authentically in all your womanhood in order to make a difference.
Can I just say, everybody watching at home, snap. It is hard because it's, for us to bring a conversation like this to a close, which I always say these conversations, this isn't the end of the conversation, it's the start. Now the work begins. We've taken the seeds out and now we are planting them in your minds, and you can hopefully effect change in your own environment. I mean, other than staying tuned to all the platforms of Old Mutual and seeing of the different programs available to you, it's to start around you. When they say charity begins at home, it really, really extends. How are you helping the woman in your life? How are you helping the woman that sits right next to you at your desk without fear of, they're going to sabotage me, they're going to do this. So I think the conversation is just beginning. And to me, Women's Month is all year round, because it's not like the responsibilities and the burdens stop. We just have more platforms to have such conversations, and I hope that they continue. And now, in closing, final thoughts, Rhea, and you have one sentence.
Nothing, Lebu. Thank you so much. I've really enjoyed being part of this conversation.
Oh, nothing to add. Okay. Mandisa, you can have her second sentence. You have two sentences. You have 2 sentences.
I think for me in closing, is to really thank Old Mutual for making this platform available. I know that at times we are constantly talking about these issues and feel like it just is a long talk shop. But I think the more conversations we have, we realize how many layers are actually needed to ensure that women find their space in society, find their space in the economy. It's not just about hiring them. After you've hired them, how do you make sure that they're able to rise, able to grow, able to raise children, able to do whatever it is they have been called to do? So I think having these conversations is critical, but what becomes the next level is, what do we do collectively to take some of these ideas forward, to knock on those doors, to hold people accountable, so it becomes beyond the conversation. Next year, if we are sitting around on any other platform where we're talking women's issues, we come back with results to say, look, in the past year, yes, we've impacted maybe 5 girls, but we've actually moved, the needle forward because of the conversation that we had the last time we met. So yeah, that's for me. That's it.
She stole your half sentence, so you've got half a sentence. You have half a sentence.
So I think Ria's thanked you, and we've thanked Old Mutual. I think what I do want to appeal to is probably viewers who are going to get an opportunity to listen to the podcast, is that for me, the mentorship of women isn't a formal process or something you need to sign up for. You really just have to feel it in your heart and have the advocacy and want to do it. And it doesn't have to be follow me around the office all day. It's something as simple as pulling someone aside, especially in corporate, and having the right conversation with them, guiding them after that bad meeting, guiding them through a process, an easier way to do something. So what scares me is that we think it's just a formal process. And I think it's the small things that you do every day in different women's lives, whether it's at work, on your drive to the office, if she's a petrol attendant, whatever it is, the role that you play is holistic. And I think taking the opportunity, whether it's male or female, just to give someone, and I know sometimes you can get backlash for the unsolicited advice, and there's a way to do it. But I think you find more people that appreciate someone who tells them and gives them feedback, and constructive feedback that's developmental and building, because I think innately people are learning beings, and we all just want someone to tell us, and it doesn't have to be junior. I appreciate my peers giving me feedback. It only helps me show up differently and better, and we all win.
Ladies, I have been enlightened by this conversation, and I appreciate the honesty. I know sometimes it's also hard in these type of conversations to look at ourselves. How are we holding ourselves back? How are we making ourselves accountable? As each of you were speaking, I was learning things about myself as a leader, and to say, the work is not done. We still have a while to go. So thank you to the 3 of you for being here, sharing your experiences. Don't worry, no one's going to cancel you, because this will be on the record. Thank you again, ladies. This was so much fun. Now it means that we need to take our heels off and get on our knees and get our hands dirty, because the work is only beginning. Thank you so much to all of you for tuning in for this conversation for Women's Month in the Old Mutual Thought Leadership podcast series. And I'm so happy to have been a part of this conversation. The work begins not just for us, but also for you. Don't forget to head over to all of Old Mutual's social platforms, to their website, so that you can see when the next conversation is taking place, and also just explore and see what products and opportunities, training programs could be available for you. You never know if you don't reach out and see. Go go and have a learning attitude and watch this again. There are so many little nuggets that you can pick up from the conversation that we have had. To the gentlemen that stayed through, thank you. Keep supporting us as your sisters. Keep holding us up and keep also holding us accountable, because we all need each other to get to the next phase, not just as organizations, not just as people, but as a nation. And I truly believe that we are one of the most beautiful countries in the world with the most exceptional potential. So from myself, Relebogile Mabotja, thank you so much for joining us in this series. Thank you for the conversation. And remember that Old Mutual is always doing great things every day, which you can be a part of. Old Mutual Life Assurance Company is a licensed FSP and life insurer. From myself, Relebogile Mabotja. Have a good one.